Hey everyone, welcome back to the Girls Night Podcast. I'm Stephanie Mae Wilson, and I'm so glad you're here with me today because we are diving into something that I know so many of us are dealing with, especially as we head into the summer season of family gatherings and reunions. As I'm recording this, I'm actually about to head off on vacation with my entire extended family, and I have to tell you, I love the time we get to spend together. I love that my daughters, Annie and Quinn, are going to get to play with a ton of first, second, and even third cousins. But I also know that for anyone who does any sort of annual gathering with their family, there's this feeling that it's sort of a check-in time. It's a time when you know that somebody's going to ask you, so what have you been up to? And you're going to have to account to them and to yourself what you've been doing with your life. We're talking about what I like to call the Aunt Sharon Effect. There are these uncomfortable, pointed questions from well-meaning family members that somehow manage to hit every single insecurity you've been trying not to think about. You know the ones I'm talking about. So were you seeing anyone special? Followed immediately by, you're not getting any younger. I was married with 3 kids by the time I was your age. Or maybe it's, when are you two going to give me some grandchildren? Or are you still doing that little blog thing? Or have you gotten a real job yet? Cue the internal screaming, right? Here's the thing. We love our Aunt Sharons, and we know our Aunt Sharons love us. But that doesn't keep these interactions from accidentally stomping on emotional landmines every single time we see these people in our lives. So today, we're going to talk about why these questions hit so hard, what's really happening underneath the conversations, and most importantly, how we can handle them with grace while also protecting our own hearts and minds. We'll cover practical scripts that you can use, mindset shifts that will change everything, and we'll talk about how to walk away from these conversations feeling empowered instead of deflated. Because here's what I've learned. The way that we handle these moments says so much about how well we know ourselves and how confidently we're walking in our own authority. And that's exactly what we're going to work on today. So let's start by talking about why these questions feel like such a gut punch, even when we know they're coming from a place of love. So first, let's be honest about what's really happening here. When Aunt Sharon asks if you're seeing anyone special, she's not just making conversation. She's operating from a very specific set of assumptions about what your life should look like at your age, and her question is essentially a progress report. In my book, Create a Life You Love, I talk about something I call the everything era. It's that decade-ish between 25-ish and 40-ish, plus or minus for everybody, when you're making the most biographically significant decisions of your life, often all at the same time. And here's the brutal truth. During this era, everyone becomes a spectator to some of your biggest life choices. Your friends, your family, they can seem like paparazzi, keeping their eagle eyes trained on your left ring finger, your drink order, your belly. They're looking for signs, for updates, for evidence that you're hitting the milestones they think you should be hitting. But here's what makes these questions particularly loaded. They're not new. In my research for my book, I discovered that the question of how women should spend these years of their lives, specifically their reproductive years, has been hotly debated for centuries. There's literally a term for it. The woman question, and it dates back to the 1400s. For most of history, women have had very few options. Marriage was the only real path to security and social acceptance. Having children was expected, not optional. Working outside the home was either forbidden or seriously limited. So when Aunt Sharon asks when you're getting married or when you're having kids, she's not just asking about your personal timeline. She's operating from centuries of conditioning that says that these milestones are how we measure a woman's success and worth. In the book, I talk about how there are 3 types of expectations that we carry: explicit, implicit, and assumed. And Aunt Sharon's questions tap into all 3 of these. The explicit expectation might have been stated directly. In our family, women get married young and start families right away. The implicit expectation is what everyone just knows without it being said. Good women prioritize family above everything else. But the assumed expectations, those are often the sneakiest. Those are the ones where you've picked up some pressure that nobody in your life actually put on you, but you carry it anyway. Maybe you heard about someone's mom who put pressure on them to stay home with kids, and you sort of assumed that that expectation applied to you too, even though your own mom has never said anything like that. Just for clarification, those expectations are examples. I know that all of our stories and all of our expectations are different, but I know that those are true for a lot of us. So here's why these questions sting so much. They turn your personal life into a performance that's being evaluated by people who don't have all the information. When Aunt Sharon asks if you're seeing anyone special, what you hear is, you're behind. You're failing at this fundamental part of being a woman. Everyone else has this figured out. Why haven't you? When she follows up with, you're not getting any younger, what you hear is, time is running out. If you don't figure this out soon, you're going to miss your chance entirely. But here's what Aunt Sharon doesn't know. She doesn't know about the relationship that almost worked but didn't quite. She doesn't know about the career goals you're pursuing or the personal growth you're doing. She doesn't know about your actual timeline or your actual desires. She's operating from a one-size-fits-all template for what women's lives should look like, and she's measuring your life against that template without knowing anything about the beautiful, complex internal life you're actually building. And here's the kicker. Aunt Sharon isn't just asking about your life in a vacuum. She's comparing it to her own experience and to what she sees as normal for your age. When she says, I was married with 3 kids by the time I was your age, what she's really saying is, my life trajectory should be your life trajectory. The choices that were right for me should be the choices that are right for you. But here's what we need to remember. Aunt Sharon made her choices in a completely different context. She had different options, different pressures, different opportunities. What worked for her in her time might not be what works for you in yours. And that's not a judgment on either of your choices. It's just the reality that we're all playing with different cards in different games with different rules. But here's what makes these questions particularly difficult. It's because these questions trigger our deepest fears about our own lives. If you're single and want to be in a relationship, Aunt Sharon's questions poke at the fear that maybe it's never going to happen for you. If you're married but haven't had kids yet, her questions poke at the anxiety you're feeling about timing, infertility, and whether you're making the right choices. The questions hurt because they're asking about the areas of our lives where we feel the most vulnerable, the most uncertain, the most out of control. But here's what I want you to remember. The intensity of your reaction to these questions is actually information. It's telling you something important about what matters to you and where you might need to do some internal work to feel more confident in your own choices. Now, let's get practical though. What do you say when you're sitting there at that family event and Aunt Sharon launches into her interrogation? First, let me give you the permission to respond differently than you have in the past. You don't have to give a full accounting of your life choices. You don't have to justify your timeline, and you definitely don't have to absorb her anxiety about your life as if it was your own. I have 5 different types of answers that you can give, and the first is the redirect. Sometimes the best defense is a good redirect. You acknowledge the question without giving it power over the conversation. So, for example, she says, "Are you seeing anyone special?" And you say, "Not at the moment, but I'm really enjoying this season of my life. Tell me about your new book club." Or, "I'm focusing on some other opportunities right now. Have you tried this potato salad? It is incredible." Or, "Dating is interesting these days, but enough about me. How is your garden doing this year?" The key with redirects is to be pleasant and confident and then immediately ask them a question about something they love talking about. Most people will happily follow your lead. The second type of answer is the boundary. Sometimes we have to be a little more direct about the things we are and are not going to discuss. Say, for example, the question is, "When are you going to give me some grandchildren?" You could answer with, "We'll definitely let you know when we have some news to share, but in the meantime, let's talk about something else." Or, "That's actually something we keep pretty private, but I would love to hear about the cruise you took last month." Or, "We're not really discussing our family planning timeline, but thanks for asking." You'll notice that these scripts don't explain or justify, they just state a boundary and they move on. You don't owe anyone an explanation for what you do or don't want to share about your personal life. You just don't. So, number 3, the third type of answer that you can give is the gentle education. Sometimes it's worth helping people understand why their questions might not be as innocent or harmless as they think. So say, for example, she says something like, "You're not getting any younger." You could respond with something like, "Everyone's timeline is a little different these days, and I'm really happy with where I am right now." You could say, "I appreciate that you care about me, but comments about my age actually feel pretty stressful." Or you could say, "I know you mean well, but that kind of pressure doesn't feel supportive. Can we talk about something else?" The fourth option for the kind of answer that you can give is the confident reframe. This is where you take control of the narrative and show them what confidence in your choices looks like. So say, for example, someone says, "Are you still doing that little blog thing?" You can respond with, Actually, my business is going really well. I'm working with some amazing clients and I really love what I do. Or you could say, I am. It's been such a gift to build something I'm passionate about. What are you most excited about in your work these days? Also, with a confident reframe, if someone asks, don't you want to get married? You could respond with, I'd love to meet the right person, but I'm just not willing to settle for just anybody. I'm building a life I really love in the meantime. Or if the right person comes along, absolutely, but I've learned that being single doesn't mean my life is on hold. Number 5 is the humor deflection, and sometimes a little humor can diffuse the tension while still protecting your boundaries. So for the question, when are you getting married, for example, you could say, well, I'm still accepting applications, so if you know anyone good, let me know. And you can laugh, of course. You could say, I'm still working on my 5-year plan. I'll keep you posted. Or you could say, I'll add it to my to-do list right after become a millionaire and learn to juggle. I was nervous about the questions that Carl and I were going to get while we were trying to get pregnant. We'd been married for a while, which of course means that the questions about when are you guys going to have kids start to really pile up. I was telling my dad how nervous I was about this, and he suggested I answer with, we would really love to have babies, but my parents never told us how babies are made. Any insight? Which I thought was hilarious. But when we look at all these different scripts, there are a few things that I want you to notice about all of the different responses. First, they're confident without being defensive. You're not attacking Aunt Sharon for asking, but you're also not apologizing for your life choices. They don't over-explain. The more you explain, the more you're implying that your choices need justification. They redirect the energy. Instead of letting the conversation spiral into an uncomfortable place, you're steering it somewhere you actually want it to go. And then they assume positive intent. You're responding as if you believe that Aunt Sharon cares about you, which she most likely does. But you're doing so without letting that care become a burden. So what about follow-up questions? Sometimes Aunt Sharon just won't let go. She pushes back or she asks follow-up questions, and here's how you can handle that persistence. So if she says something like, but don't you think you should be more concerned about your biological clock? You can say something like, I appreciate the fact that you're thinking about me, but I'm comfortable with my choices right now. Or, that's actually not something I'm worried about at this stage. Or, I trust that things will work out the way they're supposed to. And then, this is crucial, change the subject. Don't engage in a debate about your biological clock or life choices. You've stated your position, and now you're done. But then sometimes the questions that we're getting do come from a place of real judgment and criticism. When that happens, you have 1,000% permission to be far more direct. If someone says, for example, I think you're just being too picky or selfish or career focused, you could say something like, I see we have different perspectives on this and that's okay. Or, I'm not looking for advice right now, but thank you. Or, I think I know myself pretty well at this point. And then if someone continues to push after you've made it clear that the conversation is over, excuse yourself. Say, I'm going to go help in the kitchen, or I need to use the restroom, or I'm going to go say hi to uncle whoever, cousin whoever, or the family dog. Remember, you are not required to be a punching bag for someone else's anxiety about your life choices, even if they're family. But now let's talk about the internal work, the mindset shifts that will help you handle these conversations with genuine confidence instead of just faking it until you make it. Here's shift number 1. Their anxiety is not your emergency. This is huge. When Aunt Sharon expresses concern about your timeline, your relationship status, or your life choices, she is processing her own anxiety. Maybe she's worried about you, or maybe she's questioning her own life choices, or maybe she's just uncomfortable with anything that looks different from what she did. But here's the key. Her anxiety about your life is not an emergency that you need to fix. You don't need to reassure her that you're going to be okay. You don't need to prove that your life choices are valid. You don't need to absorb her worry and make it your own. In my book, Create a Life You Love, I talk about the concept of authority, recognizing that you are the leading lady of your own life. Part of that authority means understanding that other people's feelings about your choices are their responsibility to manage, not yours. Here's shift number 2. Questions aren't always neutral. I used to think that people's questions about my life were just innocent curiosity, but I've learned that questions are actually rarely neutral. They usually carry assumptions with them. When someone asks, are you seeing anyone special? They're assuming that being in a relationship is more desirable than being single. When they ask, when are you having kids? They're assuming that having children is inevitable and that your timeline should match their expectations. Once you recognize that the questions often carry assumptions, you can choose whether or not to accept those assumptions about your life. You don't have to answer a loaded question as though it was neutral. Here's shift number 3. You don't owe anyone your life story. This one was a hard one for me to learn. I used to think that if someone asked me a personal question, I owed them a complete and honest answer. But that's just not true. You get to choose what to share and with whom. You get to keep some parts of your life private. You get to say, I would rather not discuss that without providing a reason why. Your personal life is not community property, even with your family. Here's number 4. Your life doesn't need to make sense to everyone. Something I wish people had told me earlier is that the life you're building doesn't need to make sense to everyone. Aunt Sharon might not understand why you're prioritizing career over dating right now. She might not understand why you're choosing to travel instead of buying a house. She might think you're being too picky or too cautious or too risky or too whatever. And that's okay. She doesn't have to understand your choices for them to be valid. In Create a Life You Love, I talk about how there's not one right way to build a life. A beautiful life isn't one size fits all. What works for Aunt Sharon doesn't have to work for you, and what works for you doesn't have to work for her. Here's mindset shift number 5. You're not behind, you're on your own timeline. This one is crucial. So much of the pain around these family conversations comes from the feeling that we're behind, that we should have figured out certain things by now, that everyone else is ahead of us. But here's what I've learned. There's no universal timeline for life. The idea that you should be married by a certain age or have kids by a certain age or own a house by a certain age, these are social constructs, not natural laws. You are not behind. The timeline that matters is yours, not Aunt Sharon's, not society's, not your high school friends who all seem to be hitting the same milestones at the same time. Your timeline is your timeline. Here's shift number 6. Your worth is not determined by your relationship status. I feel like I need to say that one more time for the people in the back. Your worth is not determined by your relationship status, or whether you're a mom or not, or whether you own a house or not, or whether you have this job or that job, or how much money you make. That is not what your worth is determined by. So many of these uncomfortable questions tap into the fear that if we don't have one of these things, if we're not coupled up or don't have kids, or if we haven't hit certain milestones, that we're somehow worth less as a person. But that's just not true. Your value as a human has nothing to do with whether or not you have a ring on your finger or a baby in your arms or a house with your name on the deed. You are not a problem to be solved. You are not incomplete without a partner. You're not failing at life if your timeline doesn't match somebody else's expectations. You are a whole, complete, valuable person exactly as you are right now, today. And then here's our last mindset shift, number 7. You can love someone and still set boundaries with them. Remember that setting boundaries with Aunt Sharon doesn't mean you love her any less. You can care about someone deeply and still protect yourself from their anxiety about your life. Healthy relationships require boundaries. In fact, boundaries make love possible because they allow you to show up authentically and wholly instead of resentfully. When you protect your peace during these conversations, you're actually protecting your relationship with Aunt Sharon. You're making it possible to enjoy her company instead of dreading every interaction. Now, if you find yourself wanting to go deeper into any of these concepts, especially around building confidence in your own choices during your everything era, I talk about all of this and so much more in my book, Create a Life You Love, which you can get wherever books are sold. It's all about navigating this decade where you're making some of the most important decisions of your life. So now let's talk about the deeper work, how to build the kind of confidence that makes these conversations genuinely easier instead of just less awful. The first thing we need to talk about is knowing your why. The more clearly you understand your own motivations and values, the less power other people's questions will have over you. If you're single by choice because you're focusing on building your career, own that. If you're single not by choice, but you're using this time to work on yourself and build a life you love, own that too. If you're married but waiting to have kids because you want to travel first or because you're not financially ready or because you're just not emotionally ready, whatever your reason is, own it. When you're clear on your why, Aunt Sharon's questions become so much easier to field because you're not also questioning yourself. So the second way we can build our own confidence is by defining success for yourself. In Create a Life You Love, I talk a lot about the importance of defining success for yourself rather than letting other people's definitions drive your choices. So, what does a successful life look like for you? What are you trying to build? What matters most to you? When you have your own definition of success, other people's measuring sticks become irrelevant. Another thing you can do to deeply build confidence in your own life choices is to build your cabinet. This is something that I'm super passionate about. I talk about it all the time, and it's building what I like to call your cabinet. It's that small group of trusted advisors who really know you, who support your dreams, who have your back. When you have a strong cabinet, Aunt Sharon's opinions carry less weight because you have other, more trusted voices speaking into your life. Your cabinet might include your best friend, a mentor, a therapist, a coach, people who understand your goals and can remind you of your worth when you're feeling wobbly. And when you know who you are listening to, it's easier to shake off the opinions of people who aren't on that list. Another thing we need to make sure we're doing as we're building confidence in our own life choices is to practice self-compassion. Here's something I wish I would have learned earlier. The way you talk to yourself about your life choices affects how you respond to other people's questions about them. If you're constantly criticizing yourself for being single or not having kids yet or not owning a house or whatever the thing is, then Aunt Sharon's questions are going to hit harder because they're echoing your own inner critic. But if you can learn to talk to yourself with kindness and understanding, if you can recognize that you're doing the best with the information and resources you have, then other people's questions lose their sting. Another thing that we can do and should do is to remember that everyone is just making it up as they go. That's the secret. Nobody really knows what they're doing. We're all just making it up as we go along, doing our best to make good choices with incomplete information. Aunt Sharon might act like she has all the answers, but the truth is she was just as uncertain about her choices when she was making them as you are about yours now. The difference is that she's looking back with the benefit of hindsight while you're looking forward into uncertainty. And then the last thing that we can do is to celebrate your courage. I want you to recognize how much courage it takes to build a life that is authentically yours instead of just following the template everyone expects you to follow. It is brave to stay single until you find the right person instead of settling for whoever's available. It is brave to prioritize your career goals even when people question that choice. It is brave to take your time making decisions about kids or marriage or any other life choice. You're not behind. You're being intentional. You're not missing out. You're choosing carefully. And you're not broken. You are good enough, exactly as you are. Remember that this is about much more than just surviving one awkward conversation. This is about teaching people how to treat you and building the kind of confidence that serves you in all areas of your life. Every time you set a boundary, every time you respond with confidence instead of defensiveness, every time you refuse to absorb somebody else's anxiety about your life, you are building muscles that will serve you well beyond family gatherings. Now, here's what I want you to remember as we wrap up. You get to decide what your life looks like. Not Aunt Sharon, not society, not anybody else. You. You get to choose your timeline to some extent. You get to choose your priorities. You get to choose what you share and what you keep private. You get to choose how to respond when people question your choices. And you know what? The more confidently you own your choices, the less Aunt Sharon's questions will bother you. Not because she'll stop asking them, she probably won't, but because you'll know deep in your bones that you're living a life that's authentically yours. Your life doesn't need to make sense to everyone. And when you're confident in your choices, when you've done the work to understand your own values and priorities, when you've built a strong support system of people who really know and love you, well, that's when Aunt Sharon's questions become nothing more than background noise. Now, before we wrap up, I have something exciting I want to share with you, something that I've thought about for months and then finally decided to do. If you've been part of my corner of the internet for a while now, you know that I teach 3 main courses that have helped thousands of women navigate their everything era with more confidence and clarity. For the last 10 years, I've only opened up these courses once or maybe twice a year. And that meant if you were struggling with something in March and my course didn't open until September, you had to wait months to get the help that you needed. So a few weeks ago, I made a decision. I am keeping all 3 courses open and available year-round. If you need help with your single life, with your new marriage, or preparing for motherhood, I don't want you to have to wait. If this is the first time you're hearing about them, let me take just a second to tell you about each course. Love Your Single Life is for women who are tired of feeling like their real life is on hold until they meet someone. This 4-week course will help you savor, enjoy, and truly make the most of your single life while setting yourself up for incredible relationships in the future. It's about transforming a season of waiting into a season of passion, purpose, and preparation. If you're single and want to love this season instead of just endure it, and also be set up for awesome relationships when the time comes, this course is for you. Just Married is the course that my husband Carl and I teach together for couples in their first few years of marriage. We'll help you get on the same page in 6 of the trickiest areas of marriage: money, sex, family, communication, conflict, and creating a shared vision for your future together. Very few couples stumble into a marriage they love. This course helps you build a roadmap to get there. And so if you want to lay a strong, solid foundation for your marriage and future family, this one's for you. And then last but not least, Becoming Mama is the course that I built with my best friend, Kelsey, who also happens to be a brilliant therapist. It's a complete research-backed, heart-centered preparation for the real experience of becoming a mom. Whether you're planning or trying or already pregnant, this course prepares you mentally, emotionally, physically, and practically for motherhood. We'll cover everything from understanding your emotional inheritance to preparing your body, your relationship, and your career for this massive transition. And here's the thing, your everything era is happening right now. The questions you're asking and decisions you're making about love and marriage and career and family planning aren't going to wait for the perfect time to come up. And so I don't want you to have to wait for the perfect time to take these courses either. If any of these courses sound like what you're needing right now, I would be so honored to walk through this with you. You can check them all out at stephaniemaywilson.com/courses, and I'll put the direct links to the courses in the show notes. Friend, you are not behind. You're not broken, and you're not failing at life. You are courageously building a life that fits you, and that's beautiful work. So this summer, as you're sitting around that family gathering with all the questions floating around, remember that you have everything you need to handle whatever comes your way. You've got your scripts, you've got your mindset shifts, and most importantly, you've got the knowledge that you are the expert on your own life. Go forth and set these boundaries with grace, my friend. You've got this. Friend, that's it for today's episode of Girls Night. But before you go, would you do me a huge favor and take just one quick second to leave a rating and a review for the show in your podcast app? It should take maybe 15 seconds, but it makes a huge difference for our podcast, and it really would mean so much to me. Thanks so much for being here, and I will see you next week for another episode of Girls Night. Talk to you then.